Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I know I've been talking about the internet the last couple months, right? How things are changing so rapidly. But you know, we're at a point where one of the largest communities on the internet, one of the OG internet communities, 4chan, is now suing a government, okay? They're actually involved in a lawsuit. So I don't want to jump into it too quickly, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to kind of start off in the broad sense. I don't want to make this video or these set of videos all about doom scrolling, okay? A quick TLDR of getting some level of privacy right now, right here, is if you need any VPN right now, a good VPN, go to something like Mulvad, okay? They've been raided by the feds, nothing has been found. If you want something even stronger, you don't want to microdose the internet privacy, go to the Tor browser, download it for your operating system, maybe even your phone, and get started, okay? Access online platforms like Dread so you can talk to people, you can have a conversation with a human being without having a government read every single word that you're doing or prevent you from accessing the internet. So one of the lawsuits that I saw came out from 4chan and Lolcow, which would be the Kiwi Farm. So two websites on the internet that are known for being kind of the, I would say, the last bastions of anonymity, freedom in a way too, where you can make an account, say whatever is on your mind, even if what is on your mind generally isn't accepted by the terms of services for 99% of the internet, okay? The internet used to be a place where anonymity was kind of a thing. Now it seems like every government wants you to present a fucking valid driver's license ID to access video games, to access social media services, to access anything that could potentially be distressing to a child. Which, by the way, the government can freely define what is distressing to any child. And we have to figure out a way to fight back. Otherwise, this whole journey that we've had together, it changes worldwide. We literally will live in a new world order, okay? As crazy as some of the cyberpunk dystopia you've seen, this is the future. So, of course, looking into this, they say in their lawsuit, the internet is a global system of communication between computer servers located in data centers around the world. So inside this lawsuit, they've said that the internet, despite its global reach, is acknowledged that it's an American innovation, which is true. The internet was produced by the United States first, and then it allowed us to connect to the world. So in a short term, okay, the internet is kind of like a set of technologies that allow computers to communicate with each other, servers to interact. And on an international level, there are agreements between internet service providers, tier 1 connectors, to be able to exchange a mass amount of information. So what started as an American invention turned into an international phenomenon. This is the first website ever made, info.kern.ch. You can go to this website right now. You can even browse it in a simulator. The internet came from very humble beginnings, but the internet was always a decentralized-ish platform where, again, it was just computers being able to talk to each other. Unfortunately, the internet requires us to sign up to internet service providers, and of course some of those internet service providers have agreements with each other to share data. It's decentralized in theory, but for most users it is unfortunately centralized. And the scary part of this is some governments can pressure the internet service provider to block access to certain internet sites. So what has been happening to 4chan, for anybody that doesn't know or they're not in the loop about it, I made a video about this, I would say probably a few days ago, but they were investigating 4chan, the message boards, and said that apparently they wanted to see if this 4chan board failed to comply with the obligations of the Online Safety Act. So, okay, basically 4chan was failing to comply with the bullshit law the UK people built up. And I want to also say, for me, this is a huge deal because even though I'm not a UK resident, I, being a Canadian, know that what's happening in one part of the world, and if it succeeds, could easily start happening in Canada, could easily start happening in the United States. Hell, there are states where, again, they have ID verification laws. So you have to be really careful, and you have to really look at the forest for the trees. This is a united effort. Not just one country is going through this. So one piece of misinformation I do want to correct is something that had shown up around the time of this launch. This banner never existed. From what it seems, the United Kingdom is still actually able to access 4chan. So according to 4chan, they're getting fined $20,000, okay, and then daily penalties afterwards. So here's the thing, if you're a small site, and 4chan's not a major site by any imagination, they're not Google, they're not YouTube, they're not Facebook, where they literally have it in the budgets for fining, okay? This is a site that this could absolutely cripple financially if this law keeps going. Now the thing is, 4chan has said that they're not going to even bother going. They're just like saying, fuck you. First off, we're an American company, okay? You can't do shit to us. And being the fact that 4chan doesn't have offices or any tangible assets in the UK, from my understanding, legally at least speaking, cannot garnish any money out of them. So to go back to this lawsuit, the best thing about it is obviously 4chan has not just fought back, well, 4chan and the Kiwi Farms guys, but they've also brought up, again, a ruling that they want that sort of separates them from ever being targeted again. So they even say 4chan is under the laws of Delaware, okay? They're literally in Delaware, the state in the United States, okay? And of course, when it came to the guys over at the Kiwi Farms, they're in the West Virginia state, okay? They're in West Virginia. They have their own laws to deal with. So they say that 4chan is controversial, but it operates fully in compliance with the laws of the US, which is true. You may not like the speech on 4chan or any of these sites, but one thing is understandable. They do not have any content that would be deemed illegal by the United States. Contents like CSAM, for instance, and I believe like violent messaging or like promotion of violence is generally banned on every single one of these platforms. So anything that would not fall under the First Amendment of the United States, which there are some exceptions, is completely like valid, okay? As long as you're not violating the First Amendment through some of its exceptions, you will be fine, okay? The First Amendment does not protect, I think, against violent uprising or just like violent calls of threat, and obviously CSAM material. Like these are just things that are not allowed to be free speech. So what the guys over at 4chan and the farms had said was that according to Ofcom, they targeted these guys not because of neutral enforcement, but because of overly political reasons aimed at undermining the First Amendment. And I actually kind of agree here because a lot of the stuff that would be discussed on sites like 4chan, if you go onto like boards like Poll, for instance, would be a lot of discussion regarding, again, the political situations in these countries. Obviously, you may or may not agree with whatever they're writing, but the thing is, there should be a level of freedom to discuss people's like individual like thoughts and feelings, as long as obviously they're not violating that First Amendment in any way. I think if you put aside your left-right nonsense, I think what's more important here is the principle, which is free speech and the ability to have an open internet where people can communicate, where people can talk, instead of having a surveillance state that wants to control every single thing that we say. So they basically say that, again, their actions were to undermine American First Amendments by targeting just American companies that didn't really have anything in the UK other than users from their country would log onto their platform. They said that no, they don't want to have their stuff suppressed because one government on the other side of the world now wants to decide for everyone what they're doing. Now, of course, they want a declaration from the courts that their attempts, the UK's attempts, were improper and invalid, so that hopefully it never happens again. A permanent injunction prohibiting this shit Ofcom from issuing any orders or demands without proper service through the US-UK Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. So again, they want them to go through the proper channels, not just have crazy overreach on everybody. So I actually side with the plaintiffs entirely when it comes to this lawsuit, because even though obviously their sites probably consist of things that I or you may not agree with, the reality is one government, the UK, is deciding what the fuck me and you get to read every single day on the internet. They get to decide what stays up and what doesn't stay up. And I don't really agree with that, and you shouldn't agree with that either. The reality is, okay, if this was some small, no-name country, in the middle of like Central Africa or like India or something, right, where like, yeah, some countries can be big or not, the UK is a little bit different. The UK is kind of an international hub. It's a very relevant country for every other country around, okay? There's a lot of countries that don't really interact with each other. Like, for instance, if China was trying to implement a law like this, or for instance, Russia does this a lot, where like, for Twitch TV or like platforms, they'll fine you like, but it doesn't really matter, okay? Because a lot of countries have already kind of like, drawn a line in the sand when it comes to operating or sanctioning countries like Russia or even China in that case. And they're kind of detached from the Western world in that idea, a free Western world. But obviously the UK is very much a relevant player. And if they're trying to control speech 1984 style, we've got some fucking problems. Now, obviously, I've talked about internet censorship, and the thing about it is, internet censorship is sort of like the small potatoes in the room, because what's kind of unfortunately happened over here is that we really are looking at a massive surveillance state. So I'm going to admit right here that I'm getting full, conspiratorial right now. I'm really talking about conspiracies here, simply because what I have here isn't something that is a breadcrumb trail. You know how I make like a crypto investigation and I guide you from point A to point B, and it's like you can do it yourself? This is just my thoughts now running, and I kind of want to walk you through it because it really is something that I've been noticing over the last like few months, probably over the year. So obviously with 4chan and like the farms fighting a lawsuit over here, and it's a noble effort that obviously, you know, it will have far-reaching impacts. Like if they lose, it can be pretty bad. And if they win, it might save at least our side of the pond when it comes to internet freedoms and privacy. But when it comes to just privacy in general, one thing that I saw pretty spooky, and I saw this on Louis Rossman's channel, was the rise of AI surveillance, okay? Playing something like Watch Dogs, a game that came out, God, what, almost 10 years ago? A little over 10 years ago now? Was a game that had you playing as a vigilante in Chicago where like the entire city was smart controlled. There was surveillance systems that were watching and profiling everyone. I almost feel like somebody from the fucking future came back to work at Ubisoft and painted a future for what the world would be. It's a game where tens of thousands of cameras exist that monitor every single thing a person does. So Louis Rossmann has a consumer rights wiki where he actually did talk about this. This is the Flock license plate readers, right? Which I guess were known as the Flock Safety Falcon, and they're AI-powered security cameras that start to record vehicles for law enforcement agencies. Now you might be like, well, Muda, what is this? What are we talking about with this Flock safety? Now in the United States, these are camera networks that are set up. They look similar to this, okay? You probably have seen this when you're driving by places. But the idea of this is that these are LPR cameras, which are license plate recognition cameras that can be placed anywhere to capture detailed data about license plates and vehicles used to commit crimes. So it sounds like, yeah, we're making this literally to stop criminals, right? Like this is the first and foremost way. We want a system that prevents criminals from committing crime. And look, you might sit there and be like, wow, that's a good idea, Muda. I mean, what do you have an issue with this? Are you for crime? Absolutely not. I hate crime just as much as the average person does. But the thing about this is that this system is operating in 49 states and doing 20 billion vehicle scans monthly. And the reality of it is you don't have any option to dial away from it. And the data that they have, according to, again, the Consumer Rights Wiki, could be brought into Palantir. That's a video I'm making a little bit later. Palantir is a huge project, and it's a very, very interesting personal project of mine because talk about some shady stuff. But basically, the crux here is that they're using artificial intelligence to create what are known as vehicle fingerprints. So for instance, your car, when it drives past one of these cameras, will have a fingerprint created. Now, obviously, if they've got tens of thousands of these cameras nationwide in the US, imagine just for a second what that means. That means if the other camera starts picking up your vehicle and then the third camera picks up your vehicle using artificial intelligence, because now we don't need to hire people to actually do the grunt work for us. Now we can just feed all this data into an AI and it can process, you know, tens of thousands of human man hours in a fraction of the time. And so now the AI is now cataloging exactly where you're going from. So the creepy part about it is you probably can't avoid a main road. I know that I can't avoid main roads and highways when I have to go from place to place, city to city. So we now live in a world that is literally 1984. And you might be like, didn't they have this kind of technology before? Yes, we've had CCTV cameras before. We did not have AI-powered surveillance cataloging every single thing that we do. And so the thing is, you actually pay money to the government in taxes every year, and that money is being used to set up these fucking cameras through this third-party company that is working with law enforcement, you know, all the glowies and everything to spy effectively on you. You're paying for your own spying. It's crazy shit. And even if you don't have a license plate, they have artificial intelligences and systems that can still track you even without that license plate provided. And there have been some creepy situations, one that I'll bring up right over here, where a law enforcement officer, a police chief in Kansas, used that same technology 164 times, by the way, to track an ex-girlfriend. Imagine that! The fucking boys in blue that you pay money in taxes. Don't ever date one, because if you make them jilted, they'll use a goddamn AI tracking tool to fucking find you. That's how scary it is, okay? That's how crazy this shit can get. And you might be like, but Muda, okay, that's just one thing. What about the effectiveness of it too? Well, let's talk a little bit about the effectiveness of being spied constantly. In Austin, Texas, they're currently fighting for this and talking about this shit. And Sarah Hamid from EFF went out and said in her own city, she showed a 0.2 success rate in terms of arrest per scan. Just imagine. You have Minority Report the movie, okay? But instead of that, Tom Cruise can't even arrest anybody. He can't even arrest himself. The Minority Report AI doesn't even work the best, okay? It just sits there cataloging everyone and barely contributes to any actionable thing. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons where these cameras actually do more harm than they do good. So the thing is, we now are paying to live in our own little surveillance state. So forget just the internet censorship. It seems like everywhere you go to, at least with the advent of things like AI and all these tools, it really is the next stage in tracking every single thing that you and I want to do, okay? So first off, they want to see what you're doing on the internet. They want to take away that little bit of anonymity from you. And the reason why I talked about these cameras as well is that these cameras are designed to be a deterrent when it comes to people, behaving as they normally would. They want to create a docile surveillance state that effectively falls into line. And whether they're achieving this on the internet or in reality through these AI-powered surveillance tools, it really seems like a lot of this technology that's coming out to light, especially when it comes to things like artificial intelligence, I have mostly seen it used in nefarious purposes, and I see very little. There are good uses for artificial intelligence, but generally speaking, I have seen more of the dystopia, more of the Black Mirror, than I have the actual good side of it, which is alarming. And of course, obviously, at the end of all this comes the last bastion of true internet freedom, which would be the dark web. I've covered this for years. I've talked about the dark web. I would consider myself to be somewhat of an expert onto just browsing the dark web in general. Okay, I think I've done it for years. I've seen every goddamn website, every hoax at this point, throughout my years just browsing this side of the internet. And obviously 2 days ago, an article comes out from the guys over at The Guardian. Privacy at a cost. The dark web's main browser helps pedo networks flourish. Now, again, I don't want to discount and say that the dark web doesn't have illegal shit on it. I have definitely come across illegal stuff, illegal communities. I've covered illegal communities on the dark web. I've come across, the hitman websites, the mafia sites, the drug vendor sites. Now, I can't confirm if these sites are actually real, valid, or honeypots because I've never went beyond a cursory glance or, infiltrated these communities because ultimately, it's still illegal stuff. Why jump into it? The thing about it is, there is bad stuff happening, but there's also a lot more bad stuff happening in the clear web. So for instance, millions of predators are forming sprawling online communities on the dark web using the Tor network. And that's true. There might be predators, but I would argue there's probably more predators sitting on sites like Roblox, probably sitting on platforms like Discord, than there are just people on the dark web. You honestly think that children are downloading the Tor browser and connecting to a fucking Onion website that changes every so often just to talk with people online? Or are they probably sitting on the most popular online video games and messaging platforms where these predators are hunting individuals on, okay? I get it, the dark web is scary. You can misrepresent every single thing you see on the internet, but I have made tons of videos on the dark web, and I would say a vast majority of the websites that I've seen have probably just been goofy, edgy things, or very lighthearted stuff. For fuck's sake, I learned how to make cookies. Legal cookies, okay? Legal cookies, by the way, not drug ones, off the dark web. So of course, they try to actually pin it on the web, and they actually have said, we've talked to the dark web people about stopping this, repeated warnings of a growing number of predators taking advantage. But this is when even they don't understand what they're talking about. Because again, they do say the privacy architecture has created a safe haven for predators. And the thing is, when you have something that is designed for human freedom and human privacy, there are going to be people that find ways to abuse it, right? That's unfortunately a reality. But you're also ignoring the value that comes and has come from the dark web and true anonymity, which is that people have been able to speak against evil regimes, people have been able to send messages to their loved and family and friends without government surveillance stopping them or government surveillance hindering how they communicate with people. There's a lot of reasons why you would use the dark web for completely legitimate reasons. And of course, they're pinning all of this stuff onto the dark web. And I really feel like a politician, once they realize that, okay, We can't really stop VPNs, but we can try to. What is that next layer of technology that can't be stopped? Well, obviously, it's the dark web. Obviously, that's going to be the next bit of technology that I think a lot of these organizations try to fight for. And so they're going to start looking at the relay nodes. They're going to start looking at the exit nodes. They're going to start looking at all of this technology and how, again, they can push that censorship, push that surveillance into more invasive parts of the web that realistically shouldn't have that. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a wild world, okay? We live in a world where 4chan and the Kiwi farms is suing an entire government. We live in a world where cameras are watching every single thing that we do, where we drive to, building up a repository of information that they can share with politicians and fucking government agencies and glowies, and basically decide, hey, that guy is a risk factor. Because let's imagine you're living in like a very liberal state and you're like a conservative guy. What if you're put onto a list? What if you're put onto like monitoring? What if it's vice versa? You're like a bleeding heart liberal living in the middle of Texas. Imagine they do the same thing to you. It's not a left to right thing. It's literally the upper class, the governments, okay, the elites, who are trying to turn the people under them, directly under them, into cattle, okay? And right now, the only people that are getting rich off of this shit are the fucking big-ass billionaires running these tech companies that are selling AI surveillance tools, to the government, just to basically create the surveillance state that we're living in. It's a fucked up world. And if you're not looking at all of this, if you're not noticing any of this, if you're not recognizing any of this stuff, I know some people consider that to be like a dog whistle or something, but really, this is a pattern of government surveillance, government censorship, government overreach that people should be looking at. Instead of fighting amongst each other for a second, okay? Put the fucking arguments down, okay? Put the Twitter down. Stop arguing. Just think for a second. In a year or two, will the internet look the exact same as you once envisioned it? Will it be a place where you can freely discuss what you want, or is it a place that's already just taken away from you? Which future do you want, okay? You can either put aside the bullshit fighting right now and talk to your congressman, talk to your congresswoman, talk to anybody, okay, to stop this shit right here and right now. Or for the next foreseeable future, you can lose all your access. You can lose all your freedom and ability to freely speak your mind. Anyways, this is me, Mutahar, and I am out.